Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 151st session of the online Optom learning series OOLS. And for today's session, we have with us Mr. Nick Howard. Mr. Nick is qualified as a contact lens optician in the year 1984 and works primarily with challenging ocular conditions and complex contact lenses. He is also a part-time lecturer, trainer, and presenter at various conferences, and also works at 2 different places in the UK. He has published a number of articles in professional optical journals. He is the winner of the prestigious Contact Lens Optician of the Year award in 2012 and have also received the fellowship of the BCLA and is currently a BCLA council member and a faculty speaker. He is working, as I mentioned, at 2 leading practices and also in his independent practice where he manages patients with contact lens fittings and innovative techniques for myopia management and dry eyes. And today, sir is going to talk to us about corneal topography, something which is really very, I think, gaining more importance in the technological world, and how we can be utilizing this instrument and how we can compare it or not compare it with a keratometer. So welcome, sir, onto our platform, and let me just leave the screen time to you.
Thank you very much, Accredited. Thank you for your very kind introduction and your very kind invitation as well. As you mentioned, I first qualified in 1984, and if my mathematics is correct, that's 37 years ago. Oh, that makes me feel very old. That makes me feel like I'm from a previous lifetime. And I'm going to talk today about the benefits really of corneal topography, and I'm going to make several comparisons with the limitations, if that's the right word to use, of the keratometer. This is, I should add, one of my favorite subjects, and you're quite correct. I work in 2 hospitals in the UK, and I also work in private independent practice, so I have a very broad working week. Now, a lot of the work that I'm going to show you today has really been accelerated and is more important because of the global pandemic that we find ourselves in with COVID-19. So my first slide is a picture of myself in pre-pandemic days. This is what I used to look like before the pandemic started, and I'll show you now a picture of what I look like now. This is me in 2021, and you can see my primary objective is safety. You can see I'm wearing gloves, I have an apron, I have a face shield, I have a face mask, I have tape across the top of my mask. My safety is my most important factor, because I still have patients to look after. And this safety aspect prompted me to work with one of my colleagues from the hospital in central Manchester. And we wrote an article which was published, this was published in June 2020, and we discussed various methods of improving our safety levels whilst maintaining a successful clinic. The profession in the UK enjoyed this article, and we wrote an additional piece which was published just 1 month later. And I'm very grateful to my colleague, Dr. Cindy Tromans in central Manchester, for her help with this very difficult, but this very topical subject. Now, in the second article, you'll see here a topography. This is a fairly straightforward topography, and we're going to revisit this topography more than once this afternoon. You can see I've also made a reference to video slit lamps, which are also very useful. But today is all about topography and keratometry. You can see there's an image here of a rigid gas permeable contact lens. But the right at the top of this article, you'll see there that topography helps to reduce contact with patient. We can spend less time with our patient, but we can still achieve a very successful level of contact lens fitting. And this is probably more important in 2021 than it was in 2019 when you saw that original image. Now let's have a look at the keratometer, because the keratometer always amazes me. It's a fantastic instrument, and I'm very grateful to one of my colleagues in the UK for this splendid image. This keratometer dates back to what we believe is 1907. This was just into the 20th century, and the history of keratometers is very interesting. The first scientist to really look at keratometry and the power of the cornea was Kepler back in 1611. Now, this really was the Dark Ages, and Kepler was a good scientist, but he honestly believed that accommodation, the change of the power of the eye, was due to corneal changes rather than a lenticular change. And it was a British scientist called Ramsden who in 1796 developed the very first workable keratometer. And what he did is he proved that accommodation was not due to corneal change. Now, this was interesting because for a scientist to prove a theory correct or incorrect was quite an achievement. But Ramsden was very upset. He actually believed Kepler's theory. And as the history books tell us, he threw his keratometer away, and it was reinvented in 1854 by Helmholtz, just 3 years after he'd developed the ophthalmoscope. So the interesting thing about the keratometer is that it was never really developed for contact lenses. If you consider the year 1796, this was the year when Napoleon first started ravaging Europe. This was a long time ago. This was pre-contact lens work. And the question mark we ask is, what was the keratometer for? And arguably, it was for ophthalmology. It was a refractive tool, not a contact lens tool. So we spin forward now to a modern keratometer, and we ask, have we shed any light on the benefits of keratometry? This is a keratometer in one of the UK university teaching rooms. Has it changed that much? And the answer is no, not really. The theory and the practicality of keratometry has not really changed that much in over 100 years. And what does it do? Well, arguably, the keratometer gives us very, very little value in that it only measures the central 3 millimeters of the cornea, which is a remarkably small area, and it's a central area as well. And of course, within contact lens work, we need to know a little bit more about the periphery of the cornea. So let's go back in history a little way now. And this is an image of a Portuguese ophthalmologist, Antonio Placido. We're all familiar with the Placido disc, and Placido was well ahead of his time, I believe, and he developed this series of concentric rings to assess corneal shape. And this was a far, far better method of assessing corneal regularity. And his keratoscopy was used by ophthalmologists right up until the 1980s, when computers started doing analysis of corneal shape. And I've got with me, I hope this works okay. I've got with me today a keratoscope. I'm going to hold this up very, very near my camera here. I hope you can see this okay. And I'll switch on now. You can see, hopefully the lights are coming on there. Okay, and this was a fabulous tool. I've worked with this in practice. It's held just a few millimeters away from the ocular surface, and certainly ophthalmologists post-corneal grafts were using these instruments quite widely prior to the advent of computers. So what did computers do? Well, they stopped us using an old-fashioned material, which was plaster of Paris. These are contact lenses made in 1889. These are remarkable scleral lenses. You can see there's a central optic zone here. We can see that there's a definite difference between the nasal and the temporal haptic portions. The optic zone is displaced very slightly off center. These are fantastic, but plaster of Paris is not a good medium to use on the ocular surface. So the Victorians needed something very much better to gauge corneal shape. And what happened was that the keratometer sort of fell into place. It was never really designed for contact lenses, but it was swallowed up by contact lens fitters, contact lens opticians, ophthalmologists who were fitting contact lenses. And of course, what we have is this rather ugly Victorian instrument, which gave us fairly simple imagery. I call these spaceships. I think they look like something coming in from outer space, but they give us a reading of the central part of the cornea. At the time, the topography did exist, but it was very, very, it took a very long time, and the practitioners of the day needed something very, very quick to gain this corneal measurement. So keratometers stayed with us for decades and decades and decades until the advent of this. We've now got computerized video keratoscopy. So this has taken my keratoscope to a new level. You can see we still have the Placido-Myers on this small screen here. And the image that we take is translated by the computer. Now, rather than just a series of concentric circles, you can see each one of these dots here represents a single measurement by this instrument. The measurements are rather more dense in the central part of the cornea, and they become a little more diluted towards the periphery. And the magic of topography is we've now got, this is a two-dimensional image, but we can call this a three-dimensional image of corneal shape. Now, I've used this particular image very, very carefully indeed, because we can see that the central circle here, this is the pupil itself. And the squares that we see on the screen, these are 1 millimeter squares. So if we count across, we've got 1, 2, 3, and a little bit. This is about 3.3 millimeters diameter. And we can see there that this particular cornea is spherical in the center. This is a very, very, what we call a normal cornea. But then when we go further out towards the periphery, we can see that the cornea flattens out quite considerably. And this marker here, and we will cover this in a second, this is a 7mm marker, this faint line here. And beyond 7mm, the cornea becomes rather a flat tangent angle. There's much research on this over the past few years. And the interesting factor here is that on a cornea such as this one, which is very normal, the dioptric difference between the central cornea and the peripheral cornea is very often well in excess of 20 diopters. Typically, on a slightly steeper cornea, this could easily be 30 diopters. And when I first learned about topography as opposed to keratometry, this really did open my eyes. This took away a lot of the mystery which surrounded the peripheral cornea. So here's someone who takes away a little bit of darkness in our lives. This is my colleague. This is one of my very good friends who works in central London. And you may wonder why she's on here. Well, the answer is this is her topography. And you saw this image in the earlier article that we wrote. And this was fascinating because this gave us a lot of light in terms of what happens with any cornea, and you can see that Ros has a pupil diameter of 3.34 millimeters. I'm just showing that there, and you can see that within the pupil we have this lovely figure of 8 image, which is with the rule astigmatism, and this is just over 2 diopters. I think this was a 2 diopter cylinder, and it shows up on the right hand side here as a 2.03 diopter cylinder. The axis was 8, and this married perfectly with Ros's spectacle prescription. But look what happens when we get beyond that 3mm marker. The cornea flattens out considerably and actually becomes almost spherical in the mid periphery. So before we go any further with this, we're going to have our first little poll now. I think Fakhruddin's got the handle on this. So there's 4 questions here. Do you have a corneal topographer in practice? So the answers here are yes, I use the instrument extensively. No, my keratometer is all I need. No, but I'd like to have one. And yes, I've got one, but I'll be updating it pretty soon. So let's have the answers. And there are no, I'm right with this one answer, Fakhruddin. There are no right or wrong answers with this one. It's just a very, very simple poll.
That's right. We just want to know whether you have it, or do you own it in your practice if you are working, or if you are a student, do you have access to it while you are studying as well? So about 50% are already using it extensively, and about 30% of them do not have access at this point of time, but they would like to have the access. Yeah, and there's somebody who says there right at the bottom, yes, and I'll be updating my current machine soon. That's a great answer, actually, that one, because all the instruments that I'm going to talk about from here onwards are very, very simple instruments. They are the basic Placido type topographer. In the hospital, we have a couple of very advanced instruments. We have the Pentacam, which the ophthalmologists use all the time and I use occasionally. But I think when we're talking today, we're talking very much about the sort of entry-level type instrumentation. That's fantastic. Okay. So we'll move on now. We'll go on to, so this is a more detailed look at Ros's topography. And what I've done on this particular image, I've inserted 3
markers. We've inserted markers at 3 millimeters, we've inserted a marker at 5 millimeters, and we've inserted a marker at 7 millimeters. And the benefit of this is we can see what's happening centrally, we can see what's happening just beyond that pupil region, and we can see what's happening in the periphery as well. And this is extremely important for contact lenses, for even straightforward, simple contact lenses. This is extremely important. And it's actually quite common that astigmatism, we can see here this lovely regular and symmetrical figure of 8, pretty much disappears by the 5 millimeter marker. By the 7 millimeter marker, the eye is almost spherical. The computer indicates 1.5 diopter of astigmatism, but this has a lot more to do with the fact that the nasal cornea flattens out a little bit more quickly than the temporal. And if you remember those images from 1889 of contact lenses, the Victorians knew about these. They knew about this in the 19th century, so this should not be a great surprise. And our benefit is that we can fit a contact lens from this image. This is a rigid gas permeable contact lens, and we had to do 2 or 3 minor adjustments. But what you will see here is a beautifully fitting contact lens. And what we're able to do is assess the corneal clearance at this central point here. And our target is 20 microns. And we can see this one is clearing in the center there at 21 microns, which is absolutely ideal. The benefit of our topographer, and I can't do this on an image, but we can run our cursor over the contact lens at any position, and we can actually see micron clearance below 20 microns. Now, on a slit lamp below 20 microns, fluorescein disappears. We can only guess at that sort of clearance. We can see fluorescein above 20 microns. That's actually quite easy, but below 20 microns, we don't know. So that's a beautifully fitted rigid gas permeable corneal contact lens without ever putting a contact lens on eye. I can do this in office all by myself. I don't even need to have the patient present. So I'm going to run through now a series of images which explain the benefits of my topographer as opposed to the keratometer. And this was a patient that I was doing some work on with dry eyes. This was a young female patient. And we can see on the right eye here, we have a very, very normal central cornea, this central 3 to 4 millimeters. But down here, we've got a low level, we've got a subclinical keratoconus. This is a keratoconic patient. And I looked at this, I looked at the refraction, I looked at the keratometry, I looked at the retinoscopy, and there was no sign of keratoconus whatsoever with this patient. The left eye was more interesting in that the keratoconus was just beginning to work its way into the pupil margin and have an effect on, and have an impact on quality of vision. But again, this patient was fully unaware of any visual disturbance. Now, this was very important to me because it meant that I could take actions, I could give patient advice on making sure that this keratoconus did not progress to a more advanced level. So this was a screening tool which highlighted an ocular surface disease that neither I nor the patient would have had any knowledge of. And I want you to just keep this image in mind, because we're going to have a look at another image later on, which is very, very similar to this one. So the next image here is a fascinating one. Again, we've got a pupil here. The pupil diameter is 3.14 millimeters. The topography shows a lovely figure of 8. This is with the rule astigmatism, but we can see that beyond the 3 millimeter margin, the eye flattens out considerably. And when we apply the keratoconus screening tool, this is an algorithm that the topographer has built in. The computer is 99.5% certain that this patient has keratoconus. Possibly our only clue is the other eye, where the keratoconus is very, very obvious indeed. But again, this one on keratometry, this showed a 3 diopter sill. On refraction, it showed a 3 diopter sill. On every other method of assessment, this showed a 3 diopter with the rule cylinder, but this was actually a very low level. This was a subclinical keratoconus. And again, we were able to screen and give this patient expert advice, whereas the keratometer would have been completely fooled by this particular image. Now, here's an image of a rather more advanced keratoconic patient. We can see the image on the left-hand side. This requires no explanation whatsoever. What's interesting about this image is we can see the Placido Myers here are very, very spaced out. From keratoscopy alone, from my very, very basic tool, I can see that this is a very flat zone here. Interestingly, on the right eye, this patient, it wasn't a dreadfully advanced keratoconic patient, but there was a small nebula here, and you can see this very, very steep area, which would effectively rub on the back of a conventional rigid gas permeable contact lens. So let's move on to rigid gas permeable contact lenses. Now, apologies, you may have seen this image before. I've used this image a number of times over the years. This is an image of a keratoconic patient on first diagnosis. This patient had no idea that she had keratoconus other than there was a visual disturbance. And as part of the BCLA, we took this image to a number of conferences, both in the UK, we took it to the Middle East and the Far East, and we invited practitioners, experienced practitioners, to fit this particular eye with rigid gas permeable contact lenses. We can see here that our corneal clearance centrally here is as little as 2 microns, and if we go a little bit further down, that possibly would have been a full impact on the corneal tissue. And we were unable, we had around about 100 practitioners who were unable to achieve a satisfactory fitting with a virtual fitting program. And I think the next slide is that's me at one of the conference, and that's my posture, which says, I surrender. I say this cannot be done. We need to have more information here, and we almost certainly need to use a scleral contact lens in this instance. So how do we fit scleral lenses from these very basic corneal topographies? You can see we've got a keratoconic patient here, but if we measure, we can see the edge of the cornea, we can see the limbus at this stage, we can see the limbus here. We've only got maybe 9 millimeters of coverage from these limited topographers. And I'm fully aware that there are more advanced instruments on the market now which can profile the cornea to limbus and well beyond. But this particular topographer allows us to take several images of the eye in different positions. So what we do is we ask the patient to look up, we take an image. We ask them to look to the left, we take an image. We ask them to look down, we take an image. And to the right, we take an image. And lo and behold, the computer pulls all these images together to make a simple, what we call a composite map. So we can see here that the keratoconus is inferior to visual axis. We can see that the edge and limbus and beyond it is relatively normal. And we have the software now which we can fit not only rigid gas permeable corneal lenses, but we can fit rigid scleral contact lenses simply from our topography image. Now we'll have a look at this one because it ended up quite complex on what looked quite simple. With scleral lenses, we needed a reasonable clearance. We needed around about 300 microns of clearance. You can see that's in green. We don't want excessive clearance, but we don't want too little clearance either. And this was the image that the computer defaulted to. And you can see here, we are going to get limbal touch. This is going to be a little bit of a disaster if we fit lenses. It's also sitting rather proud at both 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So this lens will be quite uncomfortable. So I thought, okay, we'll increase the sagittal depth. And you can see we ended up with a heavy touch here. This would have caused some blanching. You can see we've still got this edge clearance at 12 and 6 o'clock. And we've now got a lot of central clearance, which some might argue is not that bad, but this would have a significant impact on oxygen transmission. Finally, how do we do it? Well, we juggle. We juggle with all the numbers. We can change any curve we like in the mid-periphery. We can also have a control on sagittal depth, and we're getting near the mark now. We need to land the lens somewhere, and you can see we've managed to clear the central cornea, but we're landing the lens in these mid-peripheral zones, which is, I'm happy with this, but we've still managed to get this excessive clearance at 12 o'clock, and my guess is that this lens will be very uncomfortable to wear and possibly allow the ingress of air, which will be wholly unsatisfactory. So we spent a little bit more time with this one, and we were finally able to come up with this contact lens. We were able to land it at the sort of 3 and 9 o'clock positions here. We've got good clearance at limbus. And this, and we've managed to get rid of all the excess clearance at 12 and 9 o'clock. But this took about 6 or 7 modifications of all of the scleral parameters. So we were changing the sagittal depth, we were changing the transitional zone, but we were able to do all of this without the patient being in practice. We did not have to spend time trying one lens after another. I didn't have to spend time bringing the patient back into hospital. This ended up as a very successful fitting at the first attempt. So we're going to go on polling question 2 now, because I've been talking quite a lot about specialty clinics. I've been talking about my hospital clinics, my keratoconic patients, probably my post-grafts. And the question is a corneal topographer an essential tool? And there's a key word here, in the specialty clinic. So it's there's some nice straightforward answers here. Yes, yeah. No. We like straightforward answers. Now, yeah, you'll notice on this one that this is the first time that I've mentioned ortho K in the UK. A lot of eye care professionals purchase a topographer to do ortho K because it's arguably an essential tool. But we're getting some fabulous responses coming in now.
Yeah. So I think majority of them are saying yes. About 75% of the attendees are saying yes, and a couple of them say it's only probably for ortho K fittings, and a couple of them still feel that keratometer is adequate for them. Yeah. It's a fantastic response. I've discussed this with some of my colleagues in the hospitals in central London, and where they see some very complex conditions, and they are experienced enough to put a lens on eye and get a fabulous image of what's going on just from fluorescein patterns and assessments. But that comes with time, and I think certainly topographers have a strong part to play in the specialty clinics. Yeah, that's what I agree. 77% of people, I think, there said yes, it's an essential tool. Okay, that's great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to my
high street clinics, what I call my regular clinics. There we are, there's me in regular clinic. And we're going to have a look at some regular corneas. And the first one we're going to have a look at is mine. That's me. You'll remember my friend Ros from central London. She took these images of me way back in, well, that was 2013 that she took these images. And these were very deliberate. There was a good reason for taking these images. We were doing an exercise on assessment of contact lenses with a corneal topographer with the pre-lens tear film in mind. And this is me. These are my topographies with contact lenses in situ. And I was deliberately wearing two different types of high quality, single use, silicone hydrogel, spherical contact lenses. You can all see that I'm myopic. I'm around about a -4. And on my right eye, you'll see here that I have quite a severe disruption of my tear film. You can see these high points where it's a little bit orange. You can see the low points. This is a very disrupted tear film. On the left eye, and I want you to ignore this red line for a moment, you can see that across visual axis, and I hasten to add, I've got rather a large pupil there. That's about a 4.5 millimeter pupil there. Across visual axis, this is very, very smooth. Now, the interesting part of this particular exercise is that as a patient, I wasn't particularly aware of any difference in either comfort or vision between the two products. But in reality, if you showed these images to me and said, right, which product do you want? I'll say this one straight away. It's very easy to assess. The red band that you see here, bear in mind, I think this was a -4.25, this contact lens. This is the edge of the optic zone. This is where the lens comes back in. And you can see there's a tiny little bit of temporal decentration here. Now, on a spherical lens with a millimeter or so of decentration, this wouldn't necessarily matter. But the next image is very interesting. This is one of my colleagues from the hospital, and she's wearing spherical, soft contact lenses. You can see that both contact lenses decenter slightly temporally, and that's in keeping with our Victorian friends back in 1889. They knew all about this. And on the right eye, I'm not overly concerned about that little bit of temporal decentration, but you can see on the left eye, there's not only temporal decentration, but there's inferior decentration as well. And this is very, very easy to measure over the top of contact lenses in situ. And we can calculate any unwanted prismatic effect simply from the mathematics of this movement. Now, again, on a spherical contact lens, this may not matter too much, but if we were fitting lenses in multifocal form, or for that matter, and much more importantly, if this was a myopia control lens with concentric optic zones, this would be a very, very important factor to take into consideration. So this is a very, very valuable tool in our regular non-hospital environments. And finally, this was a colleague of mine. This was an optometrist. I was fascinated by this particular ocular condition. He had an irregular cornea on his left eye. This is his left eye topography without a contact lens. And we can see, again, this subclinical level of keratoconus. This is keratoconus at a very, very low level. And he'd fitted himself with a contact lens. This is a spherical 2-weekly replacement contact lens. It's a -6.5, and we can see quite a heavy optic zone transition here. We can see a small amount of decentration. But he got 6.6 through this through his left eye, and he was very, very happy with it. His right eye demonstrated a more moderate level of keratoconus. You can see here we've got a moderate level of keratoconus, inferior cone, which starts to interfere with his vision. This is certainly on visual axis. Now, the image you see here is a soft toric contact lens. This is a 2-weekly replacement contact lens, and you can see the edges of the toric fitting zones here. But look what's happened to his level of keratoconus. We can see here very, very clearly indeed that the degree of keratoconus hasn't gone away with this contact lens in situ, but it's certainly reduced to a very, very acceptable standard. Now, if we go right back to the beginning where we were screening a patient who was fully unaware of her keratoconic condition because vision was very adequate, this is a very, very similar situation. So our optometrist friend has managed to fit himself almost with regular mainstream soft contact lens and correct his keratoconus to a very, very acceptable level. And he was fascinated by these images because it proved to him the mathematics of why he got good vision with conventional soft contact lenses, and why in this instance there was no necessity for rigid contact lenses of any type. Now, our final patient, and this was one of the most fascinating patients that I'd seen, was in my dry eye clinic. This is an image of a patient who was referred to me with very poor vision, but also very poor comfort. This was a patient in his it was a male, and he was in his mid 50s. And you can see here, he's got a 3mm pupil here. But you can see he has quite an unpleasant dystrophy going on here. This is very, very uncomfortable, but this is also very disturbing visually. You can see that the upper lid is having this unpleasant effect on the cornea, and you can probably see on here the irregularity on the lower lid margin, which needed some immediate attention too. Now, just 1 month later, this was 5 weeks later, this is how his cornea appeared. So we still had a little bit of something going on here. And if we just drop back one, you can see that we've made a considerable improvement on the ocular surface. He was delighted and disappointed at the same time. And he asked me, how much difference have you made to my eye? So I was able then to put the two images side by side. We can see the first image on the top here and the latter one. If you look carefully at the dates, this was 26th of July 17, and the second image was 30th of August 17. So this was just over 1 month between the two. And what we see on the right-hand side here is what we call a difference map. This is the computer subtracting one image from the other. And I was able to take the cursor from this central point here. This is the geometric center here. And I just pop the cursor on this high zone, or this elevated zone here. And I was able to measure the dioptric difference at that specific point. And the dioptric difference comes out down here as 6.35 diopters of difference. Now, I mentioned that the patient was delighted, but he was also disappointed at the same time. So I asked him about this. I said, why are you delighted? And he said, well, because you've used your modern technology to treat my condition, to assess my condition, to give me a visual image of this condition. So I said, well, that's great, but why are you disappointed? And he said to me, in his previous practice, they had an instrument that looked like a telescope, and they took an image, which he couldn't see, and they told him that his eye was reasonably okay. And he said to me, why don't they have this technology in every practice? And that was an answer. That was an answer that I couldn't give him. But there lies the difference between the limitations of a keratometer and the applications of a computerized corneal topographer. And I'm very grateful to my friend and colleague, Professor James Wolfson from Aston University here in the UK, and he wrote an editorial for the BCLA journal back in 2017. And the question he asked was that in an age of technological excellence, should the keratometer not be consigned to the optical dark ages? Should we only use keratometers as a museum piece to remind us of a darker time? So that's where I'm going to finish, really. But we've not touched on one aspect of corneal topography, which I think was my main reason for exploring the instrument, and that is orthokeratology. So I'm going to finish now with a slide which amuses me a little bit. It was taken some years ago at the University of Manchester, and it was a vague attempt at 1 hour's orthokeratology. And this is our final image. This is what I call a very happy cornea. And my belief is that corneal topography really does represent the end of the dark ages and is the light at the end of our tunnel. So thank you, Fakhruddin, for your very, very kind invite. And thank you very much indeed for listening to me today.
Thank you so much, sir. I think this is really important. You covered up very important aspects on why, topography is important and how it is going to be beneficial to our clinical practice. So thank you so much for enlightening us. The first question was really something which is come up on the chat. People are asking whether the maps, what you showed, were axial or tangential, and would you want to comment on which one do you use more nicely?
It's a fabulous question. Yeah, all the maps that you've seen are tangential. I started using the axial maps, and they're great for refractive purpose, but I think for the type of work that I'm doing in clinic, the tangential maps actually tend to overplay it a little bit. They tend to exaggerate the corneal curves a little bit. But that's what I want in my clinic. The axial maps are, what's the right word to use? A little bit, they're too average. They're too vague. They don't show the finer details. So all of the images that I've shown today are tangential. Every single one is tangential.
Awesome. Great. And do you use tangential widely for all examinations, or do you switch between sometimes?
No, I sometimes use the axial if we're trying to get a refractive situation out of, say, a low-grade keratoconus. But for me, I'll probably switch to axial no more than 5 or 10 times per year. I just use tangential all the time. And I think it's important from a patient perspective as well. They need to see consistency. They need to see the same type of map every time, because the tangential and axial can look quite different, actually. So no, tangential only for me, but I know the ophthalmologists use axial if they're doing refractive stuff. So it's a great question, actually. That a really, really good question.
Yeah, great. And one more question is, do you prefer to use any lubricating eye drops or artificial tears before performing topography, and or is it just for patients with dry eye to get a better?
These questions are absolutely fantastic. This is a fabulous question. You'll remember there was one image that I showed that was a very advanced keratoconus, where we didn't even need to know that it was keratoconus. It was very advanced. For some of the advanced keratoconus, you will need to put lubricating drops in even to get an image. That's an important one. Okay. Yeah. But in the dry eye clinic, what I do is, it's rare that I'll put eye drops in. So what I'll do 4 images of the same eye. So I'll do 1 about a second after blink, I'll do 2 about a second after blink, and on the 3rd one I'll do it about 5 seconds after blink. And what I can show the patient then is how the tear film has changed, you know, across that tear breakup time. And then the 4th one, I do it again about 1 second post blink. But the cases of dry eye, I think the topographer and the osmolarity are the 2 fundamental tests that I go by, because they're visual. You know, the patient can see exactly what's happening. A patient with dry eye has comfort issues and visual issues, and the topographer that I use has a little graph. It has an average topography, but it has a graph, so we'll take the actual as well. And if there's quite a large dioptric difference per blink, that will indicate that there's visual instability. So I use the drops if I can't get an image, but actually for the dry eye, I prefer not to use drops, because we're getting a realistic image of what's going on at ocular surface. Yeah, the drops can hide what's really happening there, I think. Great question. Fabulous question.
And any specific drops, particularly, do you want to base the drops in an aqueous based drops, you know, or you would liquid base? Or
no, I use hyaluronate 0.2% to just strengthen the tear film for the length of time that it takes to get an image. Now, it's quite common with the advanced keratoconus that we'll get, what we're getting is we're getting the tear film actually running away from the apex of the cone sometimes. So it's very difficult to get an image. On a severe dry eye, you may not get an image at all, and then we'll use the drops. But that would be documented and kept in the record card itself. But no, the lubricating drops are tear film strengtheners, aren't they? So it's the strengthening factor of the hyaluronate. Sometimes what I'll do in the dry eye clinic is I may do some meibomian expression. So we'll do topography before expression, and then maybe topography 10 minutes after expression. Yeah. And the patient can see what difference it's made to the strength and structure of the tear film. Very visual, and patients love topography. They don't always, it's not a difficult concept for them to understand. If we show them OCT, that's very difficult to, for a lay person to understand. Yes. But topography, very, very simple. Your average patient with a reasonable intellect understands the contour map. But great question.
Yeah. And have you found any difference in performing topography in different gazes for keratoconus? And if yes, why does that happen? These are. I can tell that these are coming in from patients who are very experienced and very familiar with corneal topography. Yes, very much so. The condition which is classified as PMD, pellucid marginal degeneration, we see this. Some people call it kissing bird. Some people call it crab's claws. Can be an artifact of the topographer itself. So if it's a very low
cone, if the apex of the cone is say 2-3 millimeters below geometric center, it can look like PMD sometimes, when actually it's just the topographer taking an image off axis. So if that is the case, what I'll do is I'll repeat the image with the patient looking 4 or 5 rings above the center and make a comparison between the two. So yes, you can get a massive difference in topography off visual axis. Yeah, great question.
Yeah. And I think one question which is come up on my chat here is, let's say we have a budget and we want to buy a corneal topographer. Which one do you think would serve the purpose and the best would you recommend?
What a great question! Yeah, I've done lots of work on different topographers over the years, and I haven't found a topographer yet that does absolutely everything for me. There's such a big difference between the simple Placido-based topographer that I use on a day-to-day basis and the advanced Scheimpflug systems with Pentacam and Oculus. Now we've got the ESP profilers that are going out to, I think it's about 18 millimeters or so. I'm very happy. Most of the images that you've seen today are from my Keratron Scout, and I have 2 machines, one that I use in the hospital and one that I use in the private clinics. I'm very happy with what it does, but I'm fully familiar with some of the features of other machines as well. There are a number of machines now that are doing dry eye simulation over say a 30 second or a 1 minute zone. So they're improving all the time, Fakhruddin. I don't think there is one. I don't think there is a topographer. I think familiarity. My first topographer was the Keratron Scout, and I think that it's like the first car that you drove. You like it, don't you? Even though it was probably quite old and had limitations, your first car is your best car. So yeah, I like that one. I like the Medmont. We use the Pentacam in the hospital for obvious reasons when we're doing pachymetry, and it has a more advanced contact lens fitting program. Yeah. But I can't get near it because the ophthalmologists are always using it, you know. So yeah, the answer is to that one. Do some research. Make sure it does for you what you want it to do.
Yeah, I think very well said. If it serves the purpose, and you should know what the instrument provides, and if that serves your purpose, right? I mean, if you are just into contact lens fittings, I guess the Placido's based topographers does wonderful, because you just need to map the anterior curvature and you're going to put the contact lens on. But if you are into a diagnostic clinic, probably a Pentacam would be better to look at the posterior cornea, and also to make sure because some of the questions which I just skipped were about posterior keratoconus and keratoglobus. So for that you need a bit of more of advanced instrumentation. So the purpose is really important. I totally agree what you said. Know what you want to do. And
we're doing some work next weekend with the BCLA, and we are debating exactly that question. We're saying, I've got a Placido-based topographer that I use for virtual contact lens fitting. But then, do I need a scleral profiler if I'm doing sclerals? Do I need an OCT to measure corneal thickness? And do I need a Pentacam to look at the posterior cornea? Well, the answer is yes, we need all of those. But what we're trying to stress today is that there is such a massive jump from keratometry up to the very basic levels of corneal topography.
Yeah, that's exactly the agenda and the thought process which we wanted to do. So I think with that, I think we have taken most of the relevant questions. Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful talk. And sharing those images, this really helps to look at the image and to relate it, how clinically we can incorporate that. So thank you so much.
That's my pleasure. Many thanks for your very kind invite, and many thanks everybody who's attending. I can see people from all around the globe on the screen. So thank you very much indeed for listening to me.
Most welcome. Most welcome. We do have a session planned next weekend, so do join us next week. Until then, take care, be safe, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye. Bye, sir. Thank you.
Bye, Fakhrin. Bye. Thank you.